Okay, in three,
Game time.
2,
Let's go.
1, welcome back to Beyond the Headset. I am your co-host, Rick. This is your other co-host, Jones,
What's
where we're
going
going to be
on?
talking to you about Web3, AI, VR, AR, all the news. Today, I'm going to be
All
the
the
Web3
news.
guy because
Oh.
I brought in a Web3 story. So
Wow. This is big stuff.
get
I'm excited to
dunked
hear
on,
it.
bro. Yeah.
Wow. Beat me to the punch. All right, what
Should
do you got?
I'm just going to kick off with it.
Do it,
So,
do it.
in the gaming space, there is this streamer who's very popular. His name's Dr. Disrespect. He's one of the biggest streamers in the world. So, as such, there are such celebrities now. He's got a shit ton of money. And with that money, he's been sick of all these games he's been playing. Modern Warfare, whatever else, Escape from Tarkov, all these games that he normally plays. He's sick of them. He's developing his own game. That game has Web3 implementation. It's got some collectibles, digital collectibles. There's a genre of game called or like type of game mode called extraction, which has been popular. There's this game Escape from Tarkov that like popularized it, where like you like load into a map and then you basically just try and like get a bunch of gear and then get out alive. If you die, then you just don't get anything. And
Okay.
other people are dropped in there too. So like you're fighting over resources. And his idea is that the resources you're fighting over are actually valuable. Like you could find something that's worth like 10 grand and you extract with it and then you sell it on OpenSea or something and you just made like a shit ton of money. And I just think the response to it is interesting for a few reasons. One, I have not seen outright hostility to the concept of being able to sell the items you escape with. Normally people are just instantly hostile because of the NFT thing. But there's a big concern over if the game is suddenly like worth money, like playing it, you earn money. There's a decent chance you're going to attract a lot of cheating. And it's something we've talked about security before, but I don't think we've talked about it in the gaming sense because we don't focus on gaming as much. But when it's tied with like tangibly expensive items, like if you just think about the argument is you think about the biggest games in the world right now, Modern Warfare, Halo, probably not Halo, but like there's a lot of really big competitive games and the cheating is rampant. And these games are built by multi-billion-dollar companies who probably have pretty massive teams dedicated solely to security in their games and stopping cheating. And there's still pretty rampant cheating in them all. And so the thought is like, how can any game studio implement NFTs that are meaningful if there's just inevitably going to be cheating?
Yeah. Okay.
And
this
more
is cool.
cheating than normal because things are suddenly so valuable.
For sure. Okay,
And I
this is
think
cool.
yeah, go for it.
Okay, I do have some thoughts on this. Very cool. One, about the lack of hostility. That seems out of
I mean,
the
people
ordinary.
are kind of tearing apart his idea, but it struck me that it wasn't just NFTs are bad. This is bad.
It's not like they're a scam.
It's
a
people
blanket scam.
like kind of thought it was a cool idea, and I think it's because people kind of respect the guy. He seems, I don't know, he has a good reputation with like online gamers. So I think people are assuming it's not coming from a place of I just want to make a fortune and scam you all. It's coming from a place of this is an actually interesting idea. And so it seems like people are giving him more leeway on the NFT concept. And so they're moving to the next step, which is like, okay, let's assume this is like kind of a cool idea. What are the repercussions of it? Which is interesting because normally we don't even get to that step. People just are immediately hostile.
Totally.
But
I mean,
I think the concern over the repercussions is very valid. I don't know how an indie game like this is not going to have cheating, and I'm very curious to see how bad it'll be and how much that'll affect like the price of things in game, the enjoyment of the game, that sort of thing.
Okay, first off, that's huge for the Web3 space. That legit gaming influencer is pushing a Web3 idea. Just blanket right there. That's pretty high.
I know.
And then-
I respect how bold that is, especially nowadays. Like people are so hostile to it, especially in the gaming area.
I mean, that's
people
what
on
we
Twitter,
need.
like,
Let's
fuck
go.
y'all, I'm doing it. It's cool.
Yeah,
I'm like,
that's
yeah,
what we need
I don't
like
know.
to
It's-
authentically push it forward. And then, okay, Another question, as you were talking, where does the value come from? Like the idea that you could sell one of these assets for $10,000. Where is that value coming from?
I guess I haven't played any of these extraction games, so I'm not 100% sure. But like when you extract something in these games, it can be weapons, it can be attachments, it can be money to buy other things in game. So I think it has about the same value that like Counter-Strike skins would have, which sell for a lot. Like you can there's plenty of things.
So there's proven.
I don't know what exactly, but I imagine there are plenty of items in these games where they're super valuable
because of like, what they do.
Yeah, they're like rarity and either they're cosmetic or they allow you to do other stuff in game. So
gotcha.
I mean, again, cool. It would depend on how other people perceive it. Like I don't know, if no one likes the game, it's not going to be worth, nothing will be worth even $100. But
totally. Okay, cool. That was the first question. And then second one, the security thing is actually really interesting because we did see that with Dookie Dash. Do you remember us talking about Dookie Dash? It was basically Yuga's game. So that was actually a pretty interesting case study of exactly this point because the winner of Dookie Dash was this guy Mongrel, who is like he's a top Fortnite player. He's a Web2 guy. He came into Web3 just for this, and he ended up selling the first place thing for 1.6 million, which is like a lot, right? So obviously in that case, security is going to matter. So how they did it is that they had, I mean, I don't know technically how they did it, but they definitely had like a pretty robust security situation. And so after the game closed, they took like a week or something I don't know what they did, but they basically reviewed all of the scores and they actually like booted a bunch of them that they found caught cheating or whatever. So in that way, it was a game that was heavily monetized and they implemented, pretty solid security from what I see. The caveat there, though, is this is Yuga, which is like, they have endless amounts of money. So they can spend on this. And the second caveat there is that it took them a week after the game was ended to refresh on everything and to make sure the security was in place, but it seemed like it did work. So I guess in that way, it might be interesting if you ever talk with anyone around it to point them in the direction of the Dookie Dash experience, because that was one of these things that did successfully work. However, obviously, like you're saying, this is more of an indie game. It seems like it would have to be something where, like after every game, it's like security is looked at and stuff like that. So yeah, that's definitely a fair concern for something that kind of operates automatically as a game.
I mean, it's an indie game, but he has a lot of money, I'm assuming. He's got all sorts of like gaming organizations he's a part of. So probably not as much as Yuga, but he probably is like, I mean, Yuga as a game developer is kind of classified an indie game developer because they're not like an established. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's interesting because I wonder if there is some way you could like extract with the items in game, but you don't have the NFT yet, and then they can like
review it or something.
Review it. I think if the game was big, though, it'd have to be some sort of automated review, which again would just, the financial incentive to cheat would just be too high for like. There's so many cheaters in Modern Warfare, and there's almost no incentive besides like maybe you get some sort of weird satisfaction out of winning, even if you cheat.
Okay, and an interesting dynamic that played out in the Dookie Dash thing is, so because you needed a sewer pass to enter, and I don't know if there's going to be any, I imagine with this, it won't be as much of a barrier to entry, but you needed a pass to enter the game, and the passes themselves were like, 5 figures or something like that, or 4 figures. Jesus. So, the cost to enter is high. I mean, if you had one of these things, you got it for free, it was an airdrop, whatever, but if you were just buying in. So it was kind of an interesting dynamic because the cost of cheating became very high because there was somewhat of a barrier to entry. So I think that was actually a really interesting dynamic now that you're talking about it, that because there was a barrier to entry, the risk of cheating becomes so much higher because then you're going to come out with nothing versus maybe something. For the money, the capital you put up. So that actually might be, I mean, obviously you don't want to totally, barrier anyone who's cost barrier anyone, but that dynamic actually seemed to work fairly well because it happened twice. And so I think the first time a bunch of people got booted, and then then the second time, I imagine the cheating pool was like way down because people were like, "Oh shit!" Like you like my whole investment is now zero. I'd rather get something, or at least keep what I had, than even risk cheating. So, yeah, that's interesting.
That's actually an interesting point, because that's a dynamic I've seen play out in normal gaming, where there's been a trend recently to go free to play, because you just get way more people in your game, and then you can sell them on like cheaper cosmetics down the road. Fortnite kind of popularized that on the non-mobile gaming front. But I don't know if there's been a study on this, or people just, it's anecdotal, but I've seen a lot of people talking about how when games go free to play, the cheating just explodes, because there's just no barrier to entry, versus like if you're buying a full price $60 game, like, I don't know, if you suddenly are booted from that game, your $60 investment feels very down the drain. Not that you can resell it at all, but I think it's interesting that you pointed out there, because I think it's even a thing in the $0 to $60 range too. There's still cheating in games where you pay $60, but there seems to be more when it's free.
Totally. Yeah, and almost like in how it's scaled, where it's like the Yuga one was what, like 4K entry, and then the prize was 1.6 million. If you just scale that down, prize is lower and the barrier to entry is lower. I'm sure the incentives are fairly similar in terms of like de-encourage or de-incentivizing cheating because of the risk of losing your upfront. I don't know. It's interesting. But yeah, that's what immediately came to mind. And I would, definitely encourage, if anyone in that space is like, has this ever been done? Is like, look at the Dookie Dash thing. It's actually a great example of how that can actually be done successfully.
Yeah. I'm interested. I think it's kind of still a ways away, the game, but I'm very interested to see how, like, it would probably be, at least at the get-go, very popular, just because he's so popular, and the name recognition alone would make it very popular. So I feel like that would be, when this game comes out, unless there's some surprise game coming down the pipeline, it would be the biggest game that has any sort of Web3 implementation. Wow. Probably by far.
That's super exciting, actually. That's huge news. Damn. Bringing in a Web3 heater to kick off the pod.
Yeah, I thought I would steal your job today. Sorry.
Yeah, you did not mess around. Well, I can tack on to that another piece of Web3 news that I have, which is also exciting. So, new update, I guess update you'd call it, to Ethereum is it's ERC 4337, I believe is what it's called, but it's basically account abstraction. So my technical knowledge here, as always, is going to be somewhat limited, but the idea is essentially that the UX of having an account, in like air quotes, on ETH is definitely tricky. Like when you set up a wallet, I don't know if you remember doing this. You set up a wallet, you have that seed phrase, that like 24.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So if you're first entering crypto, you're like, what the hell is this? So essentially, account abstraction, how I understand it, is that it's providing a lot more flexibility into how you can deal with accounts on Ethereum. So they were talking about things like two-factor authentication. Things like using, like a phone number to verify, to have someone else have like a dual sign-on or something, like a two-factor that's human to human. Things like sponsoring transactions. So like, say I want to do a free mint and you come in and you're like, I want to mint this, but I don't want to pay for the gas. I can sponsor that transaction. And so all these interesting things, essentially people are saying it's essentially like almost interacting with a bank in the way that UX works, where, you have two-factor authentication, you just sign in with a password. It's not this whole 24C phrase thing, and just making the UX a lot nicer. So this is brand new, but what I imagine is going to happen is that there's going to be a lot of stuff built on top of this, because it's now possible. That is just one step in the right direction of making the UX a lot smoother. So I guess to sum up exactly how it's manifesting right now, I don't know. I think it's so early that people are now going to be building on it, but it seems like it opens up a lot of potential to drastically improve the UX, especially around just the initial onboarding and still taking self-custody of your assets. So
Yeah.
that is what people are kind of up and about, excited about in the Ethereum space for the past 2 weeks or so.
That sounds good to me. I remember the seed phrase thing. I was like stressed. I was so stressed about when I started. And now I think I lost my seed phrase.
Yeah, exactly. And if you lose
screwed.
it, you lose your assets forever. And so I think there's stuff like seed phrase recovery now, and there's just a lot of stuff that seems like this unlocks. It's hard to really talk about specifics other than that it seems like it's an exciting thing and something for us to keep an eye on as it moves forward. So I guess on that note, have you been following the SBV thing?
Very lightly. I don't know. I considered bringing it up, but I just literally don't understand it enough. So it just happened. Like, didn't it really kick off
today.
yesterday?
It's happening literally like today. And so I don't totally understand how it's all happening either, but I think it is an important thing as we talk about self-custody about why that's important. Because, I think I think that it's like the government came in to bail them out today.
Yeah, they
so
closed
it's literally,
it.
I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure FDIC, the insurance for a user or an individual is max $250K. That could be totally wrong. I think that's what I
saw
read.
something similar in an article I was reading about it, which I'm guessing there's a lot of people with more than 250K
exactly
in there.
I mean, in that bank. So if you have more than that, what is that? That's gone? You can't withdraw it? If you're going to pay employees, if you're going to pay your bills next Friday, you can't get it. You've lost access to your value. That is so wild that happens. And it's just another case for the future a lot of people in crypto are pushing of this self-custody where you own your value. And it's actually fascinating because I'm actually having my first-hand experience with this, where I put but I put some money into an exchange to non-financial, I won't say anything more, but basically they won't let me withdraw it now. And so I am having this first-hand experience for the first time ever, of not being able to access my value. And it is a wild experience. It really makes you never want to put anything anywhere. Granted, this is, a crypto exchange, not insured, could very well just totally be a scam, and that would be on me. But just the whole concept of it is now, it's so potent to me now. And then, so I've been like putting all my stuff on my ledger, and now, I could use that whenever I have self-custody over that. It's so fascinating. It essentially just mimics what it would be like to have cash under your mattress, where, the only way you're going to lose that is not if the bank says you can't take it anymore. It's if someone comes in and robs you or something, or if violence ensues. So
I guess the issue, though, is, with the crypto thing, I don't understand, because you're not getting any sort of return on it, right? If it's just sitting in your...
So you can actually stake it, for example, and without having it be at a trusted party. So there's these things called liquid staking, like Lido is an example, and it's essentially decentralized, where there are staking pools, and through smart contracts, I deploy my ETH into these staking pools, and I can always take it out if I want to, without a central actor signing off on it or anything like that.
Okay. Because I was going to say, part of the appeal of tossing it all in a bank is like you make money on the money while it's sitting there.
Totally.
But if you can do that in crypto, then you're kind of cutting out the risk of that bank. I don't know, not allowing you to take it out, it implodes.
Yeah, exactly. And that's basically the entire concept of DeFi. How can you essentially programmatically generate yield? Essentially is how I kind of understand it. So it's fascinating. I was actually having a conversation with my sister about it, and she was, because I always try to get her into the kind of crypto mindset or whatever, and she was kind of walking that path, saying I can understand how much that would suck, to have your money gone or whatever. But then she just couldn't quite get over the finish line of why crypto would be a better solution. And I think her hang up was that it's just so volatile right now. Like that she would almost rather risk not having access to her funds than put it into something like ETH, which is totally fair. I totally hear that. I think my argument back to her though would be, and I'm curious to hear your take on this. My argument back to her would be that she's missing the overarching vision, I guess, for the future that people are pushing towards with the whole crypto thing. Of like, yes, obviously right now these assets are volatile, it's early stage, but the whole idea is that getting away from these trusted, centralized value keepers to your own self-custody is the direction we should be heading. And in the future, what that might look like is a more stable crypto economy where everyone has self-custody.
Yeah. I guess it just kind of comes down to the belief if we'll get there or not. Because like right now, I still wouldn't. I mean, it still is volatile, and it's been volatile for like a decade now. I don't know. Like, I'm not saying it won't ever get there. I'm just saying.
Okay, so that would be.
I would still, yeah. If you're asking my opinion on it,
So you'd basically be
it's
like,
a risky. You're kind of like betting on a future of finance that there's a real possibility it also just doesn't happen that way.
Mm-hmm. So you're basically saying you totally understand the argument. You totally see the value of self-custody. It's just questionable of if that future will exist.
I don't know if I'd say I just don't know if I understand the whole financial system enough to like feel strongly about any opinion, because it sounds nice in theory, just having money in my pocket, but like I don't know. I think there's a lot more implications to that. And I do think obviously it happens that banks fail and you lose liquidity, but it's not that common. And it almost makes more sense to have it in there in the long run, at least the way our systems run the last century, just from like a returns perspective, rather than sitting on it. I don't know. My financial opinions are very weak.
Yeah. Okay, the only thing I'll say there, because my financial, other than my kind of core belief of this is such a potent example of why self-custody matters. But I guess just to one of your points there about it's not that common, I think that's how everyone feels until it happens to them. And then it's like, oh shit, now I understand why I need to have self-custody. So, but in terms of what you're saying about like the implications and all that stuff, you're probably totally right. There are probably a lot of other externalities that even I don't really understand. So cool.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. Well, that was kind of my main thing, is just this account abstraction thing and just something to keep an eye on. Hopefully we'll see greater UX improvement moving forward. Any other smaller things that
I do have one more.
Oh,
I mentioned it prior to this. It's another fun one, I think.
Oh, I almost forgot about this.
Vocaloids, yes. I mentioned before. It's kind of like a half AI. It's not like a fully AI thing I'm talking about. There's AI involved, but I just think I personally extrapolated the idea of it to other use cases. So the story is, my boy, Porter Robinson, he has been into Vocaloids for a while. Yamaha, which is one of the biggest like music instrument creators in the world, they kind of created the Vocaloid thing, and it's been huge in Japan, where like they essentially release a voice, and then with that voice they have a character, and that character goes out and like performs concerts and like has the big one is Hatsune Miku, which is like anyone can use it, but there's also like a group that like performs with like an animated version of her in like concert venues where there's a screen up there and she's like live dancing and singing her songs. But so they've been doing this for kind of a while. It has some traction, but they've been incorporating AI into it, and some of these Vocaloids have been getting like more and more realistic sounding, to the point where some of them are like kind of mind-blowingly real. But the thing I think is interesting, and it's what Porter did, is he just released a Vocaloid of his voice, like it's trained on his voice. and now anyone can buy it and essentially use his voice in their songs. And I just feel like that's a really interesting, especially with all the talk about like AI being trained on people's work without permission.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not AI in the sense of like Chat GPT, DALL-E, super generative. Like they use AI to like hone in on having really natural sounding like syllable transitions and that sort of thing. But like extrapolating it to those other things, I think it could be interesting if people start thinking in terms of like some movie studio that has a particular animation style.
Mm-hmm.
If they sold a training kit of like a particular subset of their animation style, because it's not like Porter is like giving them an AI model of his music and you can just easily make Porter music. It's like a specific sound within his music that now you can replicate using AI. I don't know. I just thought it was kind of an interesting
super
model
interesting.
for
creator revenue. That's very interesting because it's almost like, you know how you can get vocal samples on Splice that are just vocal samples? It's almost like that, except it's not like that because you can have you can create your own words.
Yeah, you can write
How does it work?
any lyrics.
Is there a platform that...
Yeah, they have a Vocaloid software, and then you can download voice banks to it. So he just released his like Porter voice bank essentially, and you download it to Vocaloid, and then within there, it's like a MIDI editor, but with each note you write like a syllable or a word, and it'll translate it across the MIDI notes, and then you can add things like vibrato, and then where the AI comes in is it sees what you're writing and it translates it into something more natural sounding, because like I don't know, it used to be really robotic and like choppy sounding, and some of it still is, but it's gotten much better to the point where like I think the AI comes in and it sees a transition, the way this note transitions and how people normally sing this word. I don't know, it smooths it out and makes it sound a lot nicer.
That's really cool. I did not know that whole side of the industry existed at all.
I'll have to send you some of the voice banks that are out there, because some of them are crazy. Even Porter's, it's specifically trained on his recent album. He like trained it on this high vocal effect that he put on his own voice, so it doesn't even sound like his natural voice. It sounds a little bit more robotic and like cool and interesting. But there's some voice banks out there that are trained on like a classically trained vocalist that like no weird vocal effects on it, nothing, and some of them are getting like insanely realistic sounding because of
so
if
you were gonna do one for yourself, how would you do that?
I don't know. I've seen some stuff start to pop up on a much smaller scale. I think it's a lot of work to like create your own voice bank. Like this is an official collaboration between Porter and Yamaha, who make the Vocaloid software.
Gotcha.
But I do think it's becoming more and more common for people to create, because I know you can do it just with your voice not singing now. You can create trained models, and then like you just record a little bit, and then you can start typing in prompts, and it like repeats them with your voice.
So when you say you're going to use it, are you going to use a bank, or are you going to try to do something with your own voice?
I'd probably use a bank. I don't know. I don't think I have that good of a voice, so I think that's the appeal of it.
I actually remember Hard to Love, the coffee shop performance.
That's true. I did crush that one performance. High school, good times. But no, I don't know. It gives you access to vocalists without needing to... I don't know. It sounds kind of sad, because I do think there's something good about like building relationships with other musicians and getting them to record for you. But if you're a control freak, and I'm definitely a control freak with my music, it's nice that I can just be like, I don't have to deal with like other people's opinions on lyrics and song and whatever. I've got this good voice. It's cool. It's unique. It's interesting. And then I can just write everything myself and plug it in. And
totally. Yeah, hopefully it pans out similar to how most of the other AI seems like it kind of is, where it's more of an assistant. Like it just gives you the option where you didn't have one before, but it doesn't take away any of the vocalist stuff or anything like that. Because
Yeah.
hopefully,
I mean, that's the part that's cool about it is, Porter himself released the thing. And all these musicians or vocalists that are releasing their own Vocaloid banks, they're
That is really
collaborating with them. And they're essentially selling
they're attributing value for it. That's awesome.
Yeah. It feels like a lot less sketchy than, I don't know. I don't know where I stand on all the like Dolly issues with creators feeling like their style's being stolen, and if it's sampling versus learned. Like, I don't understand the underlying enough to have a super strong opinion on it, but this seems like a good model around that.
100%. Yeah, I'm kind of pro anything that opens up creators to not get completely taken advantage by the AI, which I feel like is totally a danger with all of this. So opening up new revenue streams is actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
If you're a dope singer but you don't really have much traction or whatever, and there's a platform that allows you to monetize off your vocal talent and potentially get you exposure too because it acts as some kind of marketplace or something. That's cool.
I think the issue is some of the unregulated versions of that are growing so fast that like it might not have value if I can just go on this other website and feed it a recording of this girl's voice. And then, I mean, it'll depend on, I don't know what sort of regulations are going to come through with all this AI stuff, but it'll happen eventually. And I'm very curious to see how they approach that, because if I just took this one girl's voice without her permission and plugged it into some AI thing that allowed me to write whatever song I want with it, that does feel like there probably should be some rule against that. That does feel like I'm taking her work in a sense, but maybe, I don't know.
I think 100%. Because, I mean, it's similar to what we were talking about before, where then essentially you'd be creating derivative work from her. I guess it's not really her copyrighted material, because it would be though if you're. It's just like her.
Yeah.
Her vocal.
But like, what if I just took two voices and blended them? Now, is it 50-50 split with them?
It's so interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. All it feels like is that there needs to be some kind of protection, but then it's like,
personally, I just
do that?
would feel a little bit shitty about using someone else's like style or work without them being on board with it. The more I think about this whole thing, I'm like, it's really cool to be able to use this stuff, but to use it commercially, and I just type in a prompt and I'm like, replicate this particular artist's style and make me an album art. It does feel shitty.
100%. I mean, then if you're using it commercially, you're basically, for the Porter Robinson one, you do have commercial rights to that, right?
Yeah, totally.
Cool. But he's signing on to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the perfect world, it seems like there would be some kind of fail-safe where the only way you could use any of these things, whether it's art, vocal, whatever, is if it has been something like this, where it's official, the creator gets to attribute value from it. But to your point,
I know, it's just, it's so hard with the Dolly and ChatGPT, and it can potentially blend like thousands of different artists' images into one image. And then it's like, maybe it sampled some images, but like it's destroyed them so far beyond recognition that like it's vaguely that person's style. And I don't know. I still think you should be able to opt out, ideally, in a
totally
perfect world. But
I feel like I heard things talk about that you can always tell what the inputs are, and so then you can fractionalize that out. But then, I mean, that's so complicated.
That seems. I feel like I've heard that sometimes you can tell what the inputs are if it uses a low amount. Like the actual input image, you're saying, or just
I'm saying
what the text prompt was?
Because I think I heard a podcast that was talking about how there is an interesting creator revenue model that opens up with AI, where you as a creator can opt in to have your work be something that the AI is trained on, and if the AI uses your work in an output it creates, you attribute some of that value back. And so in that way, there is some kind of tracking mechanism of image specific of what the inputs are, but that I may have totally misunderstood that, because I mean that would be complex for sure.
I'm sure they could. I don't know.
That
mean,
would be
again,
ideal.
it kind of depends on how it works at like the core level, which your boy is just too stupid to understand.
Safe.
But
We've
know.
had many. If any of y'all are interested in our speculation, you can check out some of our old podcasts where we certainly speculate on how it works.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I feel like unless you're physically building it, you just have to take the word of other people. But like, some parties are saying it's like legitimately just taking images and mushing them together, and others are saying no, it's like I don't know. I feel like it's like everything in the age of the internet is you can find something online that like validates one viewpoint versus the other, so you kind of just have to pick
100%.
whichever one you like more or has more evidence, or I don't know.
Yeah, that's so fair. Nice. I actually don't have anything else other than I was hoping we'd talk about AI again, just because it is kind of insane. So
yeah, it's popping off. Apparently GPT-4 very imminent.
oh man, I'm sure. Did you see that? Did you see that image that was going around Twitter for a while, where it was a comparison between the training data on GPT-3 or ChatGPT versus GPT-4, and GPT-4 was like 100 times the size. I think it might have been fake news, but it was just an insane graphic.
Yeah, I remember I saw an interview with Sam Altman, and they asked him about GPT-4, and he's like, holy shit, the speculation has gone so off the rails. People think this is going to be like fully sentient. Like, people are speculating that like there'll be like trillions of data points it's trained on, and he's like, no. It's going to be a lot better than GPT-3, but he's like, people are losing their minds on the speculation.
Yeah, dude, I'm so excited. I to try out the ChatGPT API. I'm pretty sure I saw it was 1/10 of the cost of the current GPT model that I'm using for
Wow.
what I'm building, and ChatGPT is just miles ahead of it. So I haven't had a chance to get around to implementing that yet, but I actually might do that this weekend, because that is so exciting. The fact that it's
so cool
a
how
relatively
easy-
inexpensive API that exactly is so easy to implement, that like it's the one API I can actually implement, is so cool. The innovation that can come from that is wild. But then of course it is about, if everyone's innovating on this, which I think will be cool. It's kind of what then separates you. What's your moat if you're building something? And I guess it's,
I know
your
there
positioning,
are
your value,
so
your
many
community.
companies like immediately popping up that I'm seeing on Twitter that like immediately I'm raising my eyebrows, like, this seems a little like, you raised money on that. Like, it just seems like some people are just taking advantage of like being an AI company, but like all they did was like repurpose the Chat GPT interface. And
Totally.
Like,
Did we talk about the nutrition startup from YC?
Yeah, we did.
Okay, yeah,
We
that was just an interesting thing from last episode, I guess. Yeah, it's just, it seems like that's not something that would be funded because anyone could spin that up in 2 seconds. But I guess maybe it is kind of just throwing shit at the wall at all these AI things.
Yeah.
And, if one hits.
that VC money though, with the Silicon Valley Bank thing, like,
yeah,
all these people hoping to make a quick buck off their like stupid AI web page that just like prompts Chat GPT, they could be screwed now.
Oh my gosh, it would be fascinating to just watch this all unfold. I'm sure we can talk more about it next week.
I'll try and like understand what's happening.
I also don't
it's also just like as we speak happening, so I'm like, I'm gonna let the dust settle a little bit.
That's the craziest thing.
Hot takes.
The craziest thing is when you see the headlines on Twitter or articles where it's like, this Friday the government came in, and this Friday is literally the current day.
Yeah,
it's pretty wild. Real time, baby. Crazy.
Real
cool
time.
Nice sesh.
Great
Good
sesh.
stuff. Alrighty.
All right, well, thank
Till
you
next
everyone
time.
for tuning in. Been a real
We'll
one.
catch you later.
That's our 10th episode.
Wow, big stuff. The listeners
The
continue
big
to compound
1-0,
also.
double digits.
Oh yeah, and stay tuned, all you fans. If you were wondering where our episode was last Monday, we might hit you with a double header this weekend. So be excited.
We are gonna
Be excited.
double freaking header.
Great sesh. Catch y'all
Peace.
later. Peace.